repeat a little of it. Okay, so now that recorder is on, I'll repeat a little of what I've said. There are two traditions in Thailand. The Thai Wat has the city function and the forest function. And like I said, Wats Milk is able to fulfill both of those because it's so large, to where the biggest part of it is, in fact, forest. And the cooties are spread right through there. And through the satellite videos, or excuse me, maps on Google, you can't see 2/3 of what's going on there because all you see is the trees. And all the cooties are spread among the trees. You can't see them. But there's one thing that's very interesting, and that is at the very, very backest part of Wats Milk, where you would normally think that the boundaries are, there's really no boundaries there. It's still just more hilltop and things. But one of the things that's in that area, which is quite remarkable, is chetties that are 1,300 years old.
Okay.
That this area of Thailand is the Chaya area was well settled by I think it's the Sukhothai Empire out of Indonesia and also part of Angkor Wat. And this was 700 AD to 900 AD through 1300 AD. And at that time, this area of Thailand was populated, settled. And they have an international museum in Chaya of a huge amount of old stuff that they've dug up over time, including there's a lot of chetties and other things like that that are ruins in that area, including right on the grounds of Wats Milk. The Thai people have known about this forever. Yeah, it's the old stuff, 1,300 years ago. But you being in Europe, you recognize, yeah, there's 1,300-year-old stuff around here, right? In the United States, nothing is older than about 400 years at the most.
Oh, yeah. Mm.
Okay, so 1,300 years is way back there. And so these are shrines that people want to go to pay homage to. And so there's pathways right up to these shrines. By the way, these temples are actually marked on Google.
Okay.
And they're called Wats, and they look like that they're, half a mile or so from Wats Milk. Well, yes, they are, but the Wat in that area is that big. All right, and it is all forest, and it's got cooties and huts all through that area. And at one time, there was about 400 monks. Now, many of them are falling into disrepair because wood buildings in the woods don't last long. So back to, well, why is there a distinction between the Thai forest tradition and the city Wats? And that distinction is not the kind of distinction that the people in the West think when they hear the Thai forest tradition. As we said, that a lot of Thai forest tradition ideas about a particular place in Thailand or a particular group of people or a particular practice or a particular teacher or whatever, rather than understanding, no, this is not just nationwide, but it's also down into Malaysia, it's in Burma, it's in Cambodia. There is this distinction between the forest tradition and the city tradition. The forest tradition is there for folks to go into seclusion, to go off into the woods, literally the way that the Buddha did, and live your life that way. Possibly my most unusual example of that was one of my own teachers, Ajahn Me. Now, Ajahn Me lived in a part of the monastery that I didn't even know existed until one day Ajahn Po told me to follow him.
Okay.
And when you get to his kuti, tell him that Ajahn Po sent you. And that was all that was needed. Okay, so I follow this guy, and he crosses the creek at a place that it looked like he was not going to be able to get up on to the bank on the other side. But no, he goes around a bush, and so I go around that bush, and I find a whole area of the Wat that I didn't know existed. And so the path just goes down to the creek and then on up the hill, and people just think that all the path has just come by the creek. Where in fact, no, it intentionally went by the creek so that the monks could go across the creek and go to the other part of the Wat that most people don't even know about. I lived there and I didn't know about it until I followed this monk. Okay, so that's an important kind of thing to recognize. Now, the reason that Ajahn Po did this was because Ajahn Me never spoke to anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and that instead of going on the rounds on Vendabat, he would go to the back door of the kitchen at the Wat because they cook food at the Wat. It's such a big Wat; they have so much going on there. And he would get his Vendabat, and then he would take his bowl and go back to his kuti, and he didn't even sit with all of the other monks, which is quite common.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to eat in community, that the monks can take their bowl and go off. And so at that level, that's the kind of lifestyle that the at the extreme that the forest tradition offers is that other than getting your food, you don't have to communicate with anybody all day long, day after day after day.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody chooses that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the way that Ajahn Me lived. Now, something very interesting about Ajahn Me is that he was actually living in a hill cave that was about an hour's walk to the nearest Bendabat.
Oh.
And when he didn't come for Bendabat, the lay people let the Wat network know. And
Uh-huh.
Ajahn Po went down and got this guy and brought him back to Wat Suanmo because he had fallen into ill health.
Oh.
And so he doesn't have to walk for an hour now. He only has to walk across the Wat to get
Mm.
his food. But other than that, that's the lifestyle that this particular monk had been living for many, many years. On the other extreme is what happens in the city Wat, where people are coming, they're offering gifts, they're asking questions, they're talking. It's a madhouse, as you have been able to see at sometimes uh, and that when people say that, oh, I'm getting burned out here, what that means is they're beginning to long for the back of the Wat or another Wat that's actually in the forest tradition rather than in the city tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the town people want that Wat close by.
Mm.
It's a major part of the social thing. I would say that Buddhism in Thailand is more of a social event than Christianity is in the West or at the Catholic Church ever.
Uh-huh.
Uh, that is part of the lives of the people. So when a young man goes to ordain, most likely he will be going to ordain at the temple that he has been living in and around and visiting very often. And this is the Wat that his mom and dad go to. A lot of people think that the monks are actually separated from their parents completely, but that's not true at all. That
Uh,
in fact, I was at a kind of a school which was mostly um, orphans, but not all, many of them were not orphans. In fact, most of them were not orphans. But in Cambodia at that time, let's say 20 years ago, they didn't have much of an educational system anywhere. That the kids need to go to ordain at the Wat if they're going to learn to read and write and all of that kind of stuff.
oh.
But when all of these kids in this huge student body, they would line up for breakfast, and then the head monk of that line would take all of the salmon in, the junior monks, to their old neighborhood in the city of, this is in Bantam Bank, by the way, that I saw this and saw such a spectacular thing, to make sure that every morning mom and dad sees little Billy there in his robe,
Oh, okay.
and they can come and check on little Billy anytime that they want to. Now, there will come a time when Billy either goes back home after he's spent time there in that Wat, but more than likely, after a few weeks or months, he will be invited to go to a forest Wat,
Uh-huh.
to get away from his parents for a while, to get away from everything for a while,
Um,
and actually get some Dhamma. One of the things that we do not want is we do not want brand new monks or new monks to take on the duties of elder monks. And that's a danger to happen in the Thai city Wats, is that the monks will go to the Wat, and then other people may not know that this is a brand new monk, and so they'll ask him questions
uh,
and put him on the spot, and that kind of thing. And so basically, they keep all the newer monks kind of away from the front of the Wat. That
mm,
we only want, uh, let us say, we want to have a monk who is there for the people, so that when they come and bring their problems, he will help them with their problems without getting their problems all over himself.
mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. In other words, we want wisdom there at
Mm,
that point of contact.
yeah.
We definitely want wisdom there, and for that reason, even the younger monks are not in the public. That you want um, monks of 5, 10, 15 years to be around people, or even 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But once a monk has spent many, many years in the forest, he doesn't want to go back to the
Mm-hmm.
city Wat. He never does want to go back there.
Mm,
So you could basically say that it depends upon the mentality of the monk and his maturity, but there is a place for all of them, because this tradition has been growing up for 2,500 years now. I mean,
mm.
it has kind of all fallen into place as to how the whole thing operates. And so now let's add women to the mix,
Mm-hmm.
because the women have all of the same things that the men do. And in fact, we want some. By the way, I'll use the word for you. It's called Maechi.
Uh-huh.
Maechi, there are three different levels of Maechi. Just like there are Upasaka, Anagorika, Samanin, and Bhikkhu for the men, you also have those things. The Upasaka is a full-on five preceptor, not one that just said the five precepts, but he's in it. He's doing Upasaka.
Mm,
The Anagorika then is going to be generally 8 or 10 precepts. And then the Samanin is going to be a junior monk, which is kind of, he's got the entire full 227 Patimokkha, but no one expects the Samanin to be able to keep it very well. And so they kind of, make it easy, make life easy for them.
mhm.
And then there's the full on Bhikkhu. So for the women, the various levels of Mechi have to do with basically how they're dressed,
Okay.
and whether they cut their hair or not. Some Mechis wear all white.
Mhm.
The all white is normally referred to as the Anagorika, or the youngest nun, the younger ones, or the beginners in middle aged. Okay, and they would normally go for the 5 up to the 8 precepts. And then when the woman dresses in black and white, then she's going to be a full-blown Maechi. Now, the Maechi may or may not shave their head, but if they shave their head, they generally go back to white. So a white head shaven woman will be at the top of the status. Then the shaven black and white, with the white on the top and the black on the bottom, either shaved or not shaved. And then the one who's wearing hair and the white is generally the beginner. Now,
Mm.
that's not strict, but that's generally the case.
Okay.
Okay? And that it has to do with the level of the precepts. Now, the situation just so happened that there were no bhikkhunis ever in Thailand, and so they never did have an ordination for Thailand, but they did what they could do to give as high a status to the women as they could to the monks.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the Western women who come to see Thailand and scream chauvinism and feminism and all of that at the top of the lungs, when what they don't realize is that the women generally run the Wats.
Mm-hmm.
There is a woman's section and a men's section, and here's the reason for that. Thailand is a matriarchal society.
Mm-hmm.
Except at the highest levels of government and police and that kind of stuff. But generally, most of the lawyers are women.
Uh-huh.
Okay, if you have a family business, more than likely the wife will run it.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly how it is right here in my neighborhood. Our landlord is Mr. Arsom, but his wife does all of that business as far as money and everything goes, but Mr. Arsom will come to make sure that the house is up to repair. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, the sewer got blocked up, and so he was here, but he was only here with his own workmen because Thailand is also very entrepreneurial. Anybody can be a plumber. If he's willing to get into it, he's it. Okay. And other things would be like delivery, like when the gas bottle for the stove runs out. The guy will bring gas bottles on his motorbike and bring it into the house and set it up for us and make it. Life is really easy in that regard because there's so many services that are available of entrepreneurship here in Thailand. But Mr. Arsom is one of the let us say important men at the Wat. Wat Po is in fact easy walking distance. In fact, we right where I live, there are 3 Wats within easy walking distance.
Uh-huh.
But Wat Po is the big one, and that's where most of the monks stay. The other one is a Wat Nook, and then there's Wat Anan, that's down this direction. But we can hear the monks when they're chanting from the porch here, when
Uh-huh.
they're chanting on loudspeaker. But when they have any festivals or festivities or anything like that, then it's Mr. and Ms. Arsom that set up the tents and the tables and all of the facilities and that kind of stuff. He's the kind of guy that does all of that, but it's his wife that really runs the place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you'll find that in any family business. If you go into a business, even if the guy is there, the owner and his wife, and he will talk to you, but behind there, guess who's got the money in their pocket?
Mm. Okay.
Now, in that regard, that means that the women in these Wats have a huge amount of power. There was a woman, her name is Ajahn Ranchuan, who is now basically Thai world famous as an Ajahn who taught at Wat Suan Mok. And she also taught in Bangkok. And she was quite famous as a teacher of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. I think she's probably dead now, because if she was alive, she'd be over 100. I don't know. But in any case, um, the women always have something to say. Now, one of the ways that these things happen is that when a man, when the husband and wife get to retirement age and they hand the business, family business, over to their kids, they will build two kutis, one in the women's section and one in the men's section, and that's the retirement community uh, for grandma and grandpa. And so there's a lot of grandmas and grandpas at the back of the Wat who are ordained in later life, but they spent much of their life once a week in the Wat, sometimes even running the Wat, paying the bills of the Wat, collecting the money from the Wat, and all of that. So the monks and the nuns basically don't have to mess with money at all.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, um, I'm not sure how many Maechi's there are in Thailand, but I would estimate at least 100,000.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But there's very, very few Bhikkunis. Now, the whole issue of are women going to be ordained, and are the monks going to be too grumpy about it and whatnot, that was all finished 30 years ago. And there are several Wats in Thailand. One of the Wats, in fact, was a Wat just for Maechi's. And at that time, there were 400 women ordained and living in this Wat. This was in Ayutthaya. Finally, the abbot was one of the Thai women who did push through the Bhikkhuni stuff, and she became ordained as a Bhikkhuni, and because of that, now she can now be the Upajjhaya, or the preceptor, for the order growing. And so it has started to grow. But it's growing slowly because the women don't know about it, they don't care about it, because they're satisfied with the Maechi system as it is, and so they don't see much reason to ordain. But all the Western women are going to say, "Why would I want to be a Maechi when I can be a Bhikkhuni?" Well,
Yeah.
you got to go to the right place to become a Bhikkhuni, because there's not enough preceptors yet to go around. 100 years from now, it won't be an issue at all. Nobody will even think about it.
Mm.
But it did happen around 1990 through 1995 that there was the issue of, what about Thai women who will fully ordain as a bhikkhuni?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when we understand that the spiritual life is what the woman should want, and that the clothing that she wears is irrelevant to a point, so long as she's wearing clothes to fit in. I mean, bikinis just don't make it at the Wat. uh, so, um, this is the way that to be looked at it, and in that regard, the way to do it is to come with the idea of traveling around and to go meet these women. I know of at least two. One was the issue, the one that that I sent you the link to,
Mm-hmm.
which is in outside of Bangkok, and the other one is the original one that's up in Ayutthaya. And
Mm-hmm.
that may be a really nice place to go, even though you say 400 women. Wow, what a gossip fest that must be. No, there's still places in the back. There are still ways of going into seclusion, and in fact, that's what they would expect of a Westerner anyway. But one of the things that the Maechi's don't have is the things that has been set up for the men, and that is places like Dam Kiem, which is kind of a training wat, but it's not to train monks, but it's to train laymen in the Dhamma. And if they do want to ordain, then they would go to the other place, which would be Wat Panana Chat. which was where Ajahn came from when he went to Amaravati with Ajahn Chah to start Amaravati. Okay, so as you can see, um, that group of Westerners is actually quite inviting to women. You said you saw a nun with that, but you, I don't know how she was dressed. Was she dressed like in the orange robes of the monk, or was she dressed in white with shaved head,
Yeah.
or was she dressed
No,
black and?
she was dressed like the monks. Yeah.
Okay, so she was a fully ordained bhikkhuni.
Yeah, I think so. Yes. There were several of them. I think there were 8 or 10 or something. And there were also white
They're getting away
dressed.
from me. I haven't been taking tabs for years now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it's on the grow.
Mhm.
So that's a further indication of another issue within. There is actually a Sangha successor or a breakup within the community at Amaravati over the issue, or the outward view of it, or one particular side's point is it's about ordination of bhikkhunis, because Ajahn Brahm ordained women in Perth, Australia,
Mhm.
and started bhikkhunis there out of compassion. But the right way to have done it would be to have gone through the way that it was set up through. Actually, it was Taiwan, which we've talked about before. That Taiwan should also be a good option for you to go there because there's so many women ordained there.
Mhm.
But they were the ones who had the forward ordination, and so they were the ones who helped the Westerners and the Southeast Asians to get bhikkhunis going. What Ajahn Brahm did was he ordained women on his own, and that's simply not allowed.
Oh.
Only the Buddha can ordain a woman as a bhikkhuni. All the other bhikkhunis have to be ordained by a bhikkhuni.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the issue, and that it's funny that they kicked Ajahn Brahm out of their little clique
Oh.
for ordaining women, and here they have what, a dozen or more
Yeah, I think
living with
so.
them,
Yeah. Yes.
and it has to do with how the ordination was done.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that Ajahn Brahm simply did not have the credentials
Mm.
or the anatomy to do the ordination. But it's alive and well. That hurdle has been crossed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's available to you.
Mm.
And it doesn't really matter of age. At one time, the idea was is that things went along the same way that it did with retirement. That once someone reaches a retirement, if they've never ordained before, if they've already ordained, no problem. But if they've never ordained before, then they should not ordain in old age because they
Uh-huh.
want to have some value or use for the Sangha, and by the time they're trained, they're dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but that's actually not the case.
Uh-huh.
That's more of an excuse that the old man will give. That,
Uh,
well, I can't ordain. I'm just going to live here at the Wat as a layman because I'm too old to ordain.
mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. So don't let age have anything to do with your decisions,
Uh,
because it, that's still up to you. That there is no age limit for ordination, though there seems to be something about a rule about age 55,
yeah,
because
I
that,
heard something about that. Yes, and I thought,
yeah, you can
okay,
ignore it completely.
okay, uh-huh. I thought I'm way too old. Yeah.
No, I could actually ordain at 75 if I wanted to. I know exactly how to do it.
But you used to be a monk too, so
Yes,
that's the difference.
that's because I know. Right, that means I know how to do it.
Yeah.
Been there, done that. Okay, so regardless of whichever ordination that you would choose to take, there will be a time when you need to stay wherever it is that you're ordaining for a while, and that for a while has traditionally been 5 years,
Uh-huh.
in the sense that the Upajjhaya will say where you're going to be for 5 years.
Uh-huh.
Normally, what that means is that the Upajjhaya will say, you go with this Ajahn and live with him, and he's in the forest.
Uh-huh.
And so that's normally what the Upajjhaya will say is that instead of keeping the student close by, because many Upajjhayas will have hundreds and hundreds of boys. You'll have hundreds and hundreds of monks under, but he will also have a whole cadre of Ajahns. And
Mm.
so, actually, in the ordination ceremony, there is um, there is the Upajjhaya who takes the prominent position, and then there are two Ajahns.
Uh-huh.
There is the primary Ajahn, and then there is a backup or secondary Ajahn. And Ajahn Po was my first Ajahn. He set up the ordination and he was there and he was presiding, which meant that Kesathero, the Upajjhaya, would naturally have, instead of keeping me in Surat Thani, he would have said, you go with Ajahn Po back to Wat Suan Mok. And that's what I did. Right. Okay. So, and I've seen that also in the United States of the young monks having an upajjhaya, but they go and stay somewhere else. But then that achan has the freedom to let the student roam.
How does one get that upajjhaya? Is that a choice, or is it how?
That will be arranged for you by the people who are curious about your ordination. They will find the upajjhaya. They know how to do that.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Mm.
And that possibly the only thing that you have to do is to find out who is the Chow Wat. Chow Wat means the head of the temple.
Uh-huh.
We would in English call him an abbot, though I have no clue of why we would use that word.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But the word Chow in Thai is an honorific. For instance, the big river that comes through Bangkok is the Pra Chao River. The Buddha is named Praputa Chao.
Uh-huh.
Other famous monks would be Pra Sangha Chao. So it's an honorific. And the Chao Wat. There's also an even higher honorific that is bestowed by, uh, basically, it's the combination of the Thai royal government and the top group of monks. That it's like in the Catholic Church the equivalent of a cardinal,
Uh-huh.
because there's about 300 of them, and their name is Chow Kun.
Mm-hmm.
So now we know about the word Chow. They
Mm-hmm.
named their big rivers. They named the guy who runs the Wat. They named the cardinals Chow. The Buddha was named Chow. And so you go find the Chow Wat, the head person there, uh, and that in a mixed Wat like Wat Suan Mok, there that will be both monks and nuns, in the sense that the nun section will have a head nun, and the men's section will have a head nun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you want to get introduced to both of them.
Oh. I think I talked with the head nun there at that place. Yes, that was. Mm-hmm.
You're talking about Amaravati.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm. Yeah.
Do you know what the word Amaravati means?
I used to know, but I forgot. I don't quite remember now.
The word Vihara or Vati is actually the word for home.
Mm.
Like the word Hara, which is heart, which is our home, okay? And then Amara is the word for amorous, amigo,
Uh-huh. Okay.
Kaliameta, okay? So that means friendly. It's a friendly home, Amaravati.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, nobody's told me that. I just picked that out of the Pali.
Okay. Okay.
And I made mistakes before. I may be wrong, but that's what it appears to be. So, this is something that you can plan on when the COVID-19 situation is done, and we've already talked about your long-term plans anyway. So, if you go ahead and take that option, then for sure, come stay a night or two on the porch. Please go visit Ajahn Po and check out Wats and Mo. But also, for sure, go to Ayutthaya and check out that Wat and go so also to these women. And by that time, you'll have a whole new set of ideas and knowledge.
Yeah, probably I will. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, you might like Ajahn Po so much that you want to stay at Deepa Bhawan, which is quite possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's difficult to know until one has been there. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so my telling stories is not going to get you there. You're going to have to do.
well, maybe it's a great inspiration. I think. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's finish this talk then and finish the video. And so then you had something else that you wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So let's do that. And we'll say ta-ta for now to everybody, and we'll finish it. Okay, bye-bye.